Hello everyone, welcome back to Data Analysis YouTube channel. For this particular tutorial, we will be going through pivot charts in detail. For subsequent videos we had done pivot tables. The link to the pivot table video is in the description box. So if you really want to know about pivot tables, please go and click the link in the description box so that you can go to the video that we discussed about pivot tables. So to do your pivot chart, the first thing I am going to do is looking at my data. Column A is supposed to be in the date format, but of course this is not the format that the data in column A is represented in, and I am going to change this to a date format just by simply highlighting the entire column, and I come to the numbers section in the Home tab and I select short date, and my date information has been formatted to look like dates. The next thing I am going to do before I do my pivot chart is to format this data as tables. So I'm going to format this data as table, okay? And the reason for this is so that my table will be flexible enough to contain more information after my pivot chart has been created. I can add more information to the table, expand it, and while I'm doing this, my pivot chart will be flexible enough to pick the information. So as we go along in the tutorial, of course, we are going to really understand what I just tried to say. And I'm going to pick any of the styles. You feel free to pick any style. And then we have this beautiful dialog box which says create table. So where is the data for your table? Excel has highlighted all the range of cells that contains the data, and also my table has headers. So I am going to click OK, and this is what I have. So this design is because of the selection I made from the table styles. You feel free to choose any of the styles that suits your fancy. So after creating this table, after formatting the data as table, I have this contextual tab showing up. So this contextual tab is called Table Design. And contextual tabs are basically tabs that pop up because of choosing a particular functionality in Microsoft Excel. And it is contextual because the features of that tab relates only to the function that is being selected. So this is why it is called contextual. When I click outside the table design tab has disappeared. But when I click inside the table design tab has appeared. So this is an example of a contextual tab. So the next thing I am going to do, I am going to rename my table and give it a name so that while I am referring to this table, Excel will bring out the name for me instead of showing me the range of cells. So I am basically going to name this table expenses. If this is your first time of joining us or stopping by this YouTube channel, kindly subscribe, share, and like, and feel free to drop comments in the comment section. Let us know what you feel about this video. Let us know what you want to see in subsequent videos. Also, let us know what you feel about even previous videos, right? So please subscribe, share this with your friends, hit the like button, and drop a comment. So after this is done, my table has been named expenses, and now we are going into creating the pivot chart. So we had done a video about pivot tables, and the link to that video is in the description box. So if you want to know about pivot tables, please go to the link in the description box and help yourself by watching the video. So I am going to hit the Insert tab, and the option I have here on the charts, I have pivot chart. So while I click on the drop down, I see two options, pivot chart and pivot table. So these are the two separate options available. For this particular tutorial, we are focusing on pivot chart only because we have done a tutorial on pivot table previously. So I will just hit the pivot chart option and I have this beautiful dialog box showing up that is saying the first section of the create pivot chart dialog box is asking me select a range, select a table or range. And as we can see, because my entire range of data is named expenses as a table, so Excel has automatically popped out the name for me. The next section is choose where you want the pivot chart to be placed. Now, I like the pivot chart to be placed in a new worksheet. So I am just going to click OK. By clicking OK, a new worksheet has been created for me by Excel, and I also see 3 panes coming up. So the first pane by my left is the pane for the pivot table. So while creating your pivot chart, you have the pivot table automatically popping up as well. So you really need to know about pivot tables before, of course, advancing into pivot charts. And like I mentioned, the link to the video about pivot tables is in the description box. The next pane that we can see, which is the one I am moving right now, is the pane for the pivot chart. So our pivot chart will be represented in this particular section. And the last pane, which is the first pane by the right, shows the pivot chart fields. It shows the various fields that we have, which is basically the headers of the different columns that we can choose from to do our pivot chart. So let us get started. In this case, right, so the data is already clean. This is why it is very easy peasy and straightforward, because the data we're using right now is already clean. In situations where you do not have clean data to work with, you might experience some challenges with doing pivot chart or pivot table when certain conditions are not met in your data. Of course, there's also a video on how to clean data to make it ready for pivot chart and pivot table analysis. So do well to watch that video in case you need to know some basic tips on how to clean your data and make it ready for pivot chart and pivot table analysis. The next thing we're going to do is we will select the fields, right? So here we have 4 fields. We have the filters, we have the legend series, we have axis, categories, and then we have the values. Okay, so it is always easiest to start from values because values is straightforward, values and numbers. Okay, so in this case, by highlighting amount, Excel automatically selects the amount field and puts it on the values. So this is what I have. And the pivot chart is automatically populated. The next field I am going to select is description, right? So, and Excel also automatically takes the description and puts it as an axis under categories, right? So this is what is done automatically for me by Microsoft Excel. And this is what it looks like. So of course, for your pivot chart, you can expand the chart, okay, to make it more visible, to make it bigger so that you can see what you're doing. And just in case I want to move, of course, you can move your fields, okay? So for the code, I would like my code to be here under legend and series, and then I will bring my date to filters. So this is what we see. My date as a filter shows is coming up here, right? So row number 1. Here, all the dates are selected. So basically, I can come and select that I want to see data only for the 7th, right? The 7th of March, 2022. And I select OK. So what I see right now is data only for the date that I have filtered. Okay, so I'm going to select everything. I'm going to select all. And so let us talk about how to move fields. You can move the fields around. Okay, the 4 spaces, you can drag your fields in the areas, in the different sections below. So basically, you can move fields in 2 ways. Number 1, you can drag and place, just like I have just done. You drag and place. Okay, and the next thing you can do is you click on this drop down and then you can select. So you can select to move this field to the report filter. You can move it to row labels. You can move it to values. And this is how you can move your fields. And then another thing you can do is you can delete your field. So after putting your fields in each of the sections, okay, in the pivot table fields, each of the section of this area, you can also delete your fields. And you can do this in 3 ways. Number 1 is that you can uncheck the radio button by the side of the field that is in this section of the pivot table fields. So I want to take out date. I just uncheck the button and the date has disappeared. When I check the button again, so I am going to uncheck the button. I have other fields coming up from the date. So I've just unchecked the button of date and my date has disappeared. If I want to remove code, okay, so I just uncheck this and the code fields have disappeared from the row section that it was previously. So this is one way. Uncheck the radio button. The second way, I'm just going to bring it back here. Okay, so the second way that you can delete fields is that you can click on this drop down and just select remove field. That's the second way. The third, okay, so the third way that you can delete fields is that you can drag it back to the field box and it is deleted. So just the same way you drag it to the field box, you can drag it out of it and take it back to where it came from. And these are the 3 ways on how to delete fields that you have in your pivot table fields. So my description was here. I'm going to take my description back to the axis, and I want to make some adjustments because I cannot see all the information that I have. So I need to adjust this. Brilliant. So I've just adjusted my pivot chart. And of course, you can adjust your pivot chart fields as well. And this is what I'm going to do. This is good. And the next thing that I would like to do is I can move, when I move the description to legend, this is what I see, right? So basically the same information, but represented in a different way. The different way is that all the single items in the description is having a different colored bar. And we have a legend that is explaining what each of the colors represent, right? If this is what you want, of course, you can leave it at this, okay? So we have different colors and we have a legend that explains what each of the colors stands for so that you can understand what is in each of the bars. So I am going to take down description back to axis. Okay, so this is what we have right now. And then the next thing to point out is that while creating your pivot chart, we have 3 contextual buttons that have been created by Microsoft Excel. 3. We have the pivot chart analyze, we have design, and we have format. When I click outside the pivot chart, those 3 contextual tabs or buttons have disappeared. But by clicking inside the pivot chart, the 3 contextual buttons are back. So let us see what these buttons have and how we can use them. So the first one I would like to talk about is design. So the design contextual tab basically has an array of functions like the chart styles. Okay, you can choose to represent your chart in any format, in any style that suits your fancy, basically. Okay, so while I hover around it, I am seeing a preview of what it's going to look like. So I can make a choice which ones I prefer, what I would like to see. So this is the default one that we had before, and I think I should choose something else. So I'm going to choose this one. And the next thing I would like to talk about is that you can also change the colors of your bars. You can actually change the colors of your bars, right? So how do you do that? You just click on any bar, click on the drop down of change colors. You can choose monochrome colors, okay? You can choose this, or you can choose anything, right? So I've just decided to choose that. Maybe that is a bit too loud. Let me choose this instead. Awesome. So this is what I can do. You can change colors, and you can also change the chart type from the design tab. You can change the chart type by clicking on this part, and you can decide, oh, I don't need bars anymore. I just want line. I need a line graph, or I need to get a scatter plot, or I want it to look like a pie chart, or I want it to look like an area chart. You can do anything. You can make any selection, right? So let us see if we choose the pie chart. This is what we have, right? So you can change it back to what it was. Let us go back to the bars that we had. Or if you totally forgot what it was, okay, you can just do Control Z. What I did, Control Z on my keyboard, is undo. So Control Z is undo. I've undone the format to take me back to the chart the way it looked before we changed it to a pie chart. Another thing you can do is the quick layout. So the quick layout basically shows you the chart with different chart elements. So basically this is Excel suggesting to you that, you know what, with this beautiful chart that you already have, there are different chart elements that you can add to it to make it more colorful, more beautiful, easier to understand. These are basically suggestions from Microsoft Excel. So you can go through the quick layout and see the ones you would like or not, right? You can choose that you don't want anything. So I think that I still need to change the color. Let me change the color. I think I prefer this one. Yes. So this is what the quick layout is about. And the next thing we can do on the design tab is that we can add chart elements. But for adding chart elements, this can also be done in 2 ways. You can do it from the design tab, and you can also do it from this plus sign that is just on the top right of the chart. Okay, so I can click here. I have axis title, which are the same thing as the chart elements that we have here, right? So I can choose to get access to my chart elements, okay, from this plus sign or from the design tab. So let us see what the elements have. Basically, like we have seen right now, the vertical and the horizontal axis does not have description, does not have a name. So we can decide to give axis titles. Okay, so I just selected axis title, and for here, I am going to name it description. It's basically a text box. So whatever you're typing, you're going to see it inside the formula bar here. So description, and I am going to name this one expense amount. And I hit the enter button, and this is what I have. And the next thing is, if you check the heading of this pivot chart, it says total, but this is not the heading, right? This does not explain anything. It's a text box, so you can always edit text boxes. And I am going to edit this to say list of expenses 2021 to 2022 and hit enter. So basically you can change the font, right? You can change the font size of the items in the text box. So what I have just done basically is to highlight the items in the text box. You can change the font style, and you can also change the font size. And you can make it bold as well, right? So you could do all these things to the items in the text box that is on your pivot chart. So we're still talking about the design, and we've basically gone through almost everything that is on the design contextual tab. So the next that we will go through is format. So in format, you can see a list of things that you can do. Okay, so you can also change the colors of your bars, okay, by clicking here, shape fill, right? And then you can change the outline, okay, of your bars. So the outline of your bars are basically like the borders. You can also change them as well. Let me choose purple. I'm trying to look for a color that is very visible so that we can see the edit that is happening. Okay, I'm choosing yellow, which is not so visible also. And we can also choose shape effect as well, okay? So how you want your bars, going to highlight the bars, how you want your bars to show up, okay? If you want it to show like a shadow or something like that. Okay, so you can also choose from here. Another thing that you can do is that you can format the plot area. Okay, so from current selection, you can come here and select plot area. And when you choose shape fill, in this instance, you are editing the plot area, right? So you're editing the plot area. Let me see, shape outline. Okay, this is for everything now. So by selecting the current selection, I click on the drop down and I select plot area, and whatever edit is done right now will be done to the plot area. Okay, so I can choose this, okay, for my plot area. You can choose whatever you want. Okay, now this particular tab doesn't really serve any purpose, to be very truthful. I mean, total, that's it. It doesn't serve any purpose. You can delete by highlighting the text box just like I have done and hit backspace on your keyboard, and that is gone. You can also remove these fields by selecting the field, you right click, and then you choose, you'll right click and then you choose hide all field buttons on chart. I actually deleted, I was supposed to hide. Okay, so hide all the field buttons on the chart. Okay, so the buttons are hidden and the chart is looking even better. So the next that we are going to look is the pivot chart analyze. Okay, so this is the next contextual tab that we are going to look out for right now. So the first part is we have the field list. Okay, it basically hides the pivot chart fields that you have here. So if you're thinking of how to hide it, you come to the field list and you can hide it. The next thing we have is the field buttons, right? Where you can hide field buttons. You remember the field buttons that was hidden before? Okay, so you can hide and unhide from this particular show and hide section of the pivot chart analyze contextual tab. So the next thing we are going to look out for is you can actually clear everything that has been done so far. You can just take everything out with the click of your mouse. And if you want to clear this beautiful pivot chart that we have spent a lot of time to create, I just click on clear all, and this is it. So everything is gone, okay? And I need to start from the scratch. So what I'm going to do is Control Z so that it takes me back to all the formatting that was done. The next thing to look out for is you can change your source data, right? You can change your data source. So the data source is, for this particular pivot chart, this is the data source, this table. You can decide to change your data source. For this particular tutorial, we have only one data source, so we do not have the flexibility of changing data source. The next very interesting aspect of the pivot chart analyze is slicers, okay? So slicers is a way to sort data, and it helps you to have an interactive pivot chart, okay? So basically, you can insert slicers by clicking on slicers, and then you can select which particular items on the slicer you want to see sub-slicers for. So I'm going to choose description and amount because this is what we have been using so far, and I click OK. And then I have these two slicers popping up. I have the slicers for the amount. I have the slicer rather for description. And just like we have for the pivot chart, slicers usually have their own contextual tab where you can use to change the slicer styles, just like you have here. You can also use to increase or decrease the button size. You can increase or decrease the size of the entire slicer pane itself, okay? For the purposes of this tutorial, we're not going to go in depth in it. The tutorial about pivot charts, we did a lot of in-depth discussions about slicers. So I would encourage you to check in the description box for that particular link to the video on pivot charts, rather pivot tables, so that you can see the detailed explanation about slicers. So what can we do with slicers? For slicers, I can decide to say, I want to see on my pivot chart, I want to see only electricity and rentage, okay? Or I want to see electricity, medical, and rentage. To enable me to select multiple buttons on the description slicer, all I basically did was, after highlighting electricity, I held down the control button before I clicked on medical and rentage. So this is what I have by selecting only few aspects of the description. And we can also see that even the pivot table, okay, is showing us only what was selected on the slicer. So this is the interesting things that you can do with slicers, right? And then you can clear the slicer filters just by clicking on this button, clear filter. And then we have our data back to the way it was. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit, okay? And the next important filter function for pivot charts that I will talk about is the timeline. So the timeline is another type of slicer that is specific to only dates. So whenever you have your set of data contains a section, a column for dates, then the insert timelines slicer is going to be active. But if in your set of data, there is no column, no section dedicated for dates, then this insert timeline slicer is not going to work because this is only related to dates. So I am going to highlight that and select. And then I would bring this below. Okay, let me adjust this a little bit more so that I can take this. Nice. And of course, I can adjust. I want to adjust it this way so that we see how we can navigate. Brilliant. I'm going to adjust this again. Of course, you can adjust your pivot charts and even your slicer. So I'll drag it this way, all the way. And this is what I have. So you see the date, the timeline is showing basically all the periods represented as dates, right? Here, column A. So it is showing this, all the periods. So what you can basically do is, if you want to select your information based on time period, what you just need to do is you select the month that you want to see the information for. And you can even drag to add other months. Okay, so just in case you want to see, it depends on how you want to see your information, right? You can drag other months so that you can see from this period to this period, these are the expenses that were incurred, right? So for the period selected, we only incurred 4 different types of expenses: electricity, rentage, residentials, and transportation expenses. But I am just going to select everything. I'm going to select everything that is on here so that we have all our information complete. So this is what we have on our timelines slicers, okay? So like I mentioned before, if this is the first time you're coming to this YouTube channel, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up if you like what you're seeing, and share this video with your friends, your colleagues, okay? And drop a comment. Feel free to drop a comment. Tell us what you feel about the video. Tell us what you want to see in subsequent videos. And please go back to other videos on pivot charts, on pivot tables, rather. I keep saying pivot charts, on pivot tables. Go to other videos about data cleaning so that you can better understand what we're doing in this particular video. So the next question, okay, why do we have to format the data as table before we use it to generate the pivot chart? Of course, if this data was not formatted as table first, you can always do your pivot chart. You can still do your pivot chart and it will come out really nice. You can still create your pivot table and it will come out nice, even if you do not edit or format your data as table. But the thing is this, when you have additional data, okay, because this is a list of expenses, and let's assume that the expenses come in every month or come in every week, and you have done this beautiful, okay, this beautiful pivot chart, and then you have additional data. formatting as table enables you to include or to add additional data, and your pivot chart, you just need to refresh your pivot chart to pick the additional data. So we will do an example right now. We can see from just by observation that Supervision Central seems to have the lowest amount, okay? The lowest total amount. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, from here is the same thing. Supervision Central has the total lowest amount. So let us assume there was another expense on Supervision Central. I'm going to copy and paste, okay? Or let me just type that. Control Z, okay? So let me type that in 2022. I probably should change the date, right? Maybe I'm going to put 10 here. And I am going to write Supervision Central. It just comes up. And I am going to put an outrageous amount so that we can see the movement in the chart, in the bar specific to Supervision Central. So I'm going to put an amount like 500,000. And I'm going to use the same code, 37006. Good. So let us see what happens. Now I am on the pivot chart. And here we have the refresh button, okay? So when you have additional data to the source data, okay? When you come here and click refresh, now this is what we have. We see now that based on the adjustment that has just been done, okay, Supervision Central is now the highest, just by clicking the refresh button. But more especially is the fact that we formatted as table, and by including more information, the table just expands. The table expands to accommodate the more information that is provided, okay? So this is the important, I'm going to take it out. And I am going to refresh again. And let us see what we have. And it's back to the way it was. So this is why it is important to first format your data as table before you generate your pivot chart or your pivot table, so that you can have an interactive pivot chart. You have a pivot chart that responds to changes. Of course, when you have more information in your source data, your pivot chart can automatically be updated just by clicking the refresh button. So in this particular tutorial, we've been able to go through how to format your data as table to prepare it for the use of pivot chart analysis. We've been able to go through also how to move fields, okay, in the pivot table field section, how to delete fields as well. We also saw how to use contextual buttons. We also saw how the filters work. We also went through chart elements, okay? You can get through to your chart elements in two different ways, by going to the design tab or by just going to the plus sign that is on the top right of your pivot chart. We also went through how to do the format, all the format functions that is in the format contextual tab, how to shape fill, shape outline, how to change the effects, okay, of your pivot chart. We also saw how what the functionalities on PivotAnalyze does. Okay, we inserted slicers, inserted timelines, and we also saw how to refresh the information. And then, more importantly, we substantiated, or we saw why we need to first format the information that we have as tables and what it does, what it means for a pivot chart. So this is all we have for this particular tutorial. In the next tutorial that is coming up, we will talk about drop-down lists and how to freeze panes, freeze columns, and freeze columns and rows at the same time. See you another time. Thank you for stopping by. Please subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Feel free to drop comments in the comment section. And I'll see you some other time.